I'm Dora. Standing on the windy roof of this 40-story skyscraper, I watch as the helicopter, with its blades still spinning wildly, hovers just 50 feet above us. The man in the back, a so-called tech mogul named Victor, is pacing like a caged animal. He's holding a flare gun, waving it desperately, trying to signal the pilot to land. Victor turns to me, his face twisted with rage. "Get off my roof. If you try to block this landing, I'll throw you off," he screams. But I stand my ground, the wind whipping my hair and my blazer around me. I feel a sense of calm, a long-awaited moment of reckoning. It all started a few months ago. I was working on the roof, checking the decimeter as Victor's helicopter made a rough landing. The noise was deafening, well over the limit set in the lease. Victor stepped out of the helicopter, wearing a suit that probably cost more than my annual salary. He was a picture of arrogance, looking right through me as if I were invisible. "Grab the bags. We're late for the meeting," he snapped his fingers at me. I told him I wasn't in charge of baggage handling, and that's when he really lost it. He sneered at me, "Do you know who signs the lease on the top 3 floors of this place?" I calmly replied that I knew exactly who it was, and that his company was in violation of multiple FAA noise abatement procedures. He laughed dismissively. "Oh, cute. The clipboard girl has a rulebook. My pilot needs a refuel. Make it happen or I'll have you scrubbing toilets." He threw a leather satchel at my feet, and in that moment, the cold knot of rage in my chest tightened. I wasn't always the owner of this building. 5 years ago, I was just a normal woman in love. My fiancé, Ethan, was a medevac pilot. He was the kind of guy with a heart of gold, always ready to save lives. We were 2 weeks away from our wedding, and I had the dress fitting all planned. We had put a deposit on a small house in the suburbs. But then, a tech startup called Novatech came along. They were pushing a new navigation assist system. They fast-tracked the certification, bribed the right people to say the glitches were minor. Ethan's helicopter was used for the beta rollout. He told me the system was glitchy, that the altimeter lagged. He filed reports, but they threatened his contract. One foggy Tuesday, as he was landing at the hospital, the system miscalculated the rooftop deck's height. The computer overrode his manual input, and he crashed into the side of the building at high speed. The settlement they offered was a large sum of money, but it was just go-away money. They wanted me to sign an NDA and disappear. Instead, I took that money and weaponized it. I learned everything about commercial zoning. I found out that in this city, the air rights and the aviation lease are separate. I discovered the building where Novatech had its headquarters, which was then owned by a struggling pension fund. I bought the building through 3 shell companies because I wanted them to pay slowly. When I bought the building, I separated the rooftop aviation lease from the commercial tenancy. I created a separate entity called Skylink Airspace LLC, which holds the master lease for the helipad. When Victor's company, Zenith Tech, moved in 6 months ago, they signed a standard commercial lease. Buried in the appendix was a clause stating that all aviation activities were subject to the exclusive oversight of Skylink Airspace LLC. Victor and his lawyers didn't read it carefully. After that first encounter on the roof, I started collecting evidence. I took photos of the helicopter's tail number and the leather satchel he threw at me. I asked a young maintenance staffer, Jake, to start logging every landing, decile reading, and missed radio check. Jake was confused when I said I was going to report Victor, but I just smiled. He had no idea that I was the landlord. A few days later, Victor upgraded his helicopter to a larger, louder one. He came in from an unsafe approach vector, flying directly over the intake vents of the hospital next door. When I confronted him, he was completely dismissive. "Did we crash?" "No, so it was efficient," he said. He then finished his latte, crumpled the cup, and dropped it on the roof, a blatant act of disrespect. I knew then that I had to build a stronger case. I took a picture of the pilot, who looked apologetic, and walked over to him. I pointed out that he was flying 70 feet lower than his instruments indicated. The pilot was pale, saying that Victor was rushing him. I went back to my office and logged into the FAA's anonymous reporting portal. I also drafted a letter to Zenith Tech about the lease violation but didn't send it yet. I called my lawyer, Mr. Thompson, and asked him to initiate an audit on the quiet enjoyment clause for the other tenants. I was building a case, like a guillotine waiting to fall. That afternoon, I called in a favor from a security contractor and installed high-def wide-angle cameras with directional microphones on the roof. Over the next week, the footage was damning. Victor was constantly screaming at his employees, making false claims about owning the building, and even assaulting the flight crew during a rainy landing. One Monday, there was a mandatory fuel system purge for the rooftop auxiliary tanks. I posted a notice on the helipad access door and sent a digital notification to Zenith Tech's operations manager. But Victor's assistant, Ryan, bypassed the electronic lock, ripped down the danger sign, and keyed in an override code. I watched in horror as the fuel contractor, a tough guy named Tom, backed away, leaving the purge incomplete. I immediately initiated a coverage freeze on the building's liability insurance. I printed the log of the override and walked up to Zenith Tech's reception desk. I left a sealed red envelope for Victor, containing a copy of the override receipt and a note about the danger of fuel icing. A few days later, I was in the lobby when I saw Ryan cornering a young girl, Lily, from a small tenant on the 14th floor. Ryan was sneering, saying they were evicting them because of a fire hazard. I stepped in, and when Ryan tried to intimidate me, I revealed that I was the owner of the building. Ryan's face turned white as a sheet. The pieces were all in place. I called Director Harris from the local Flight Standards District office. I met him at a coffee shop across the street from my building and gave him a flash drive with all the evidence, the video of the assault, the fuel override log, and the lease agreement. Director Harris was appalled. He said he could pull Victor's operator certificate immediately, but I wanted to wait until Friday when Victor had a board meeting and was flying in the chairman of the board. On Friday morning, the fax machine in Zenith Tech's office spat out a Federal Aviation Administration emergency order of suspension, and an email hit Victor's inbox from Skylink Airspace LLC terminating his aviation privileges. When Victor stormed out of the elevator, he was frantic. He accused me of filing the report, and when I told him I was just following safety protocols, he threatened to sue me and the building management company. He then tried to land the helicopter anyway, but I was ready. I pulled out a small remote control and pressed the button. The landing lights turned red, and the Do Not Land cross blazed to life. I also keyed into the emergency guard channel and informed the pilot that his landing clearance was revoked. The pilot, wisely, chose not to risk his license for Victor. The helicopter flew away, and Victor was left on the roof, his face contorted with anger and disbelief. As the police and Director Harris stepped out, Victor's arrogance melted away. He stammered, trying to make amends, but it was too late. I told him that some things, like safety, respect, and a life, couldn't be bought. I watched as they handcuffed him and walked back to the elevator. I sent an email to Zenith Tech's board of directors with the video and the notice of lease termination. For the first time in 5 years, the air smelled clean. I touched the locket around my neck with Ethan's picture and whispered, "Clear skies, Ethan. Airspace is secure." I walked out of the building, leaving behind a man who thought he was above the law. And I was just the woman who owned the sky, finally getting my revenge.